Did you really think a contractor could go on a company trip? Come on, don't be ridiculous.
The manager said with a dismissive laugh.
You should know your place by now.
Standing in the bustling airport terminal, my family was the only one without boarding passes. The cruel reality of the situation slowly sank in as I watched other families checking their luggage and heading towards security. This was all orchestrated by my manager, who had always looked down on me as a contractor, even though I wasn't one. He approached us, his designer shoes clicking against the airport floor as he walked.
A contractor wanted to go on a company trip? Don't you have any common sense?
He paused, his lips curling into a smirk.
Oh, right. Being a contractor, you probably don't know these things.
I felt my fist clench involuntarily, my knuckles turning white. The situation was going too far. Way too far. My wife Sarah stood beside me, her hand protectively on our son Tommy's shoulder. The manager's eyes drifted to our carefully packed luggage, the matching suitcases we brought specially for this trip, Tommy's favorite backpack with his travel toys. The manager's laughter echoed through the terminal.
Wow, you really were planning to go, huh?
He turned to Sarah, his voice dripping with false sympathy.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but your husband seems to have misunderstood. But hey, you're partly to blame too. I mean, having a contractor for a husband.
He turned back to me, slapping my back with unnecessary force.
Hey, contractor, go back to the office and answer phones.
That slap on my back, that single demeaning gesture, would become the beginning of his descent into hell. Though neither of us knew it at the moment, his actions would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. My name is John Anderson. Until recently, I was working as a regular salaryman at a different company, spending my days in a comfortable but unremarkable routine. Life had a certain predictable rhythm to it, until everything changed. Due to an unexpected turn of events, I found myself joining a major tech company at the age of 33. The opportunity came through my wife Sarah's connections, though at the time, I had no idea that simple job change would completely transform our lives. I met Sarah during our college years, when we were both studying abroad. She was brilliant, driven, and had a way of making even the most complex problems seem manageable. Now, we have a 5-year-old son, our adorable Tommy, who inherited his mother's quick mind and my curious nature. Every evening, Tommy runs to greet me at the door, his small face lighting up as he shares his daily adventures at preschool. Daddy, Daddy! Today I learned about dinosaurs! He'll exclaim, bouncing on his toes of excitement. He'll then proceed to repeat every new word he's learned, sometimes mispronouncing them in the most endearing ways. I can't help but ruffle his hair and praise him, watching his eyes sparkle with pride. Sarah often catches these moments, leaning against the doorframe with a amused smile. You're such a doting father, she'll say, shaking her head fondly. Tommy has you wrapped around his little finger. We are a happy family of 3. Our home life was filled with laughter, simple joys, and the kind of comfortable love that comes from years of understanding each other. But work? That was a different story entirely. You might think it's challenging to change jobs at 33 with a family to support. Truth be told, I was more than a bit nervous when Sarah first suggested it. The tech industry is known for its youth-oriented culture, and I worried I might be too old to start fresh. The day I got the job offer is still vivid in my memory. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, the acceptance letter in my hands while Sarah prepared dinner. The savory smell of her signature curry filled the air as she asked which department I'd be working in. Sales Division 2, I replied, still studying the letter. Sarah's hand stilled over the pot as she was stirring. She turned to face me, her expression oddly concerned as she tilted her head. Why that department of all places? Is there a problem? I asked, noting the worry in her voice. She hesitated, wiping her hands on her apron. Well, it's just... She paused again, choosing her words carefully. That department has the highest turnover rate. You mean people keep quitting? The curry's comforting aroma suddenly seemed less appetizing as anxiety crept in. Sarah didn't say anything more, turning back to the stove. I could tell she was holding something back, probably not wanting to dampen my excitement or add to my nerves. But when someone who's worked at the company before tells you something like that, it's impossible not to worry. On my first day, my palms were so sweaty I had to wipe them on my pants before shaking hands with anyone. The weight of Sarah's unspoken warning sat heavy in my stomach as I walked through the modern glass doors of the office building. But as I settled into my new workspace, everything seemed normal, pleasant even. My coworkers were friendly, the office was modern and comfortable, and the work itself was interesting. I remember thinking, this seems pretty normal. Everyone seems nice actually. However, I soon understood what Sarah had meant after meeting a certain person. That person turned out to be, unfortunately, my boss, the department manager. Looking back, I wish I paid more attention to Sarah's warning signs, but hindsight is always 20/20, isn't it? Either the manager hadn't bothered to read my employment documents, or he was deliberately messing with me. To this day, I'm not entirely sure which. What I do know is that from day one, he consistently treated me as if I were a contractor, even though I was hired as a regular employee. Being a mid-career hire rather than a fresh college graduate seemed to trigger something in him. His misunderstanding, or perhaps deliberate mischaracterization, of my position became the foundation for months of subtle and not so subtle harassment. The manager is what you might call a prestigious elite. At least, that's how he described himself. A Harvard graduate who never let anyone forget it. He had an impressive resume, and coincidentally, was the same age as me, 33. Maybe that's what really bothered him, seeing someone his own age who had taken a different path to success. He had risen through the ranks at an unprecedented pace, and I'll admit, he was good at his job. But his attitude? That was another story entirely. He seemed to view me as some sort of measuring stick against which to prove his superiority, and despite our equal age, he never missed an opportunity to look down on me. Then came the day that would set the tone for my entire experience at the company. I was working at my computer, deeply focused on analyzing some sales data, when I felt a shadow fall across my desk. The sharp smell of expensive cologne announced the manager's presence before he even spoke.
Hey, what's a contractor doing?
His voice carried that particular tone of mock curiosity that I would come to know all too well. I turned in my chair, maintaining a professional smile. Oh, good afternoon, sir. I'm working on the report due next week. I've actually found some interesting patterns in the...
Come on, you're a contractor, right?
He cut me off, waving his hand dismissively.
Contractors are useless for this kind of work. Just answer the phones.
Huh? What? I blinked, momentarily stunned by his bluntness. Around us, I could see other employees pretending to work while clearly listening to our exchange. The manager looked between me and the phone on my desk, his lips curled in that signature smirk that made my stomach turn.
This is why contractors are such a pain,
he announced, loudly enough for the entire office to hear.
Starting work meant for regular employees on their own. Making mistakes on their own. Just stick to menial tasks like the useless person you are.
He laughed, clearly pleased with his own wit. I'm actually... I tried to explain, but he wasn't interested in listening.
Yeah. A useless person claiming they're not useless is still useless.
He leaned against my desk, crumbling some of my carefully organized papers.
Anyway, stop doing work meant for regular employees on your own. You're just going to create more work for everyone else.
The daily grind became increasingly difficult after that. When I first started at the company, I tried countless times to tell the manager that I was a regular employee, not a contractor. But he had mastered the art of selective hearing. He would simply say what he wanted and walk away, interrupting whenever I tried to speak up for myself. As days turned into weeks, I grew wary of dealing with a manager who treated conversations as monologues. What was even more troublesome was his arbitrary demands. One particularly memorable afternoon, I was in deep concentration, working on a critical analysis of our quarterly sales data. The sound of approaching footsteps made me tense involuntarily.
Hey, you!
His voice had that familiar condescending tone. I suppressed a sigh. Yes, sir?
Make copies of these.
The thick stack of documents landed on my desk with a heavy thump, scattering my carefully arranged notes. Flipping through them quickly, I realized they were all meeting materials, dozens of presentations and reports that needed to be organized and copied. Sir? This task should really be handled by... I began, trying to explain that we had dedicated administrative staff for such tasks.
You're a contractor, so this is obviously your job.
He cut in, adjusting his designer tie of manicured fingers.
Make 10 copies of each and organize them. Due today.
My heart sank as I looked at the mountain of documents. But sir, I'm working on another task right now. The quarterly analysis you asked for. The manager had already turned away, starting a loud conversation with another employee about his weekend plans at an exclusive country club. He hadn't even bothered to acknowledge my concerns. Looking at the stack of papers, I felt a familiar weight settle in my chest. Another late night. Another missed dinner with my family. I pulled out my phone, dreading the message I needed to send to Sarah. Sorry, honey. Last minute urgent task. Don't wait up for dinner. I typed and deleted the message 3 times before finally sending it, each word feeling like a small betrayal of our family time. Thanks to the manager's delegation style, almost every day involved overtime. He would dump work on me, claiming it was contractor work, then leave precisely at closing time, his designer briefcase swinging jauntily as he headed for the elevator. The situation wasn't a secret within the office. Everyone knew the manager was awful. It was discussed in whispered conversations by the coffee machine and in sympathetic glances from colleagues. But since he was the Harvard graduate elite who consistently delivered results, nobody dared to complain officially. His prestigious background and track record of success had created an invisible shield around him, protecting him from any consequences. For me, though, the situation was becoming unbearable. The stress wasn't just affecting my work life, it was seeping into my home, creating tension in my marriage. When I started this job, Sarah and I had carefully discussed our arrangements regarding Tommy. As dual working parents, we had agreed to share childcare responsibilities equally. We'd established clear rules. Playing together on weekends was non-negotiable. Family dinners were sacred, and we would take turns picking up Tommy from preschool. These weren't just practical arrangements, they were promises to our son, promises that were becoming increasingly difficult to keep. The constant overtime meant I could rarely pick Tommy up from preschool anymore. Each time I had to call Sarah to ask her to cover for me, I felt like I was failing as a father. The guilt would gnaw at me as I sat in my office, mechanically copying documents while my family ate dinner without me. One particularly late evening, I finally made it home to find Sarah in the kitchen, cleaning up after Tommy's dinner. The clock on the wall showed 8:45 p.m., far too late for our usual family dinner time. Tommy's favorite dinosaur plate was already washed and put away. "I'm really sorry," I said, setting down my briefcase. Words felt hollow after being repeated so many times. Sarah continued wiping down the counter, her movements sharp and precise. She clearly had a long day herself, still in her work clothes with her hair slightly disheveled. "I work too, you know," she said quietly, not turning around. "I really am sorry," I repeated, feeling helpless. What else could I say? She finally turned to face me, leaning against the counter. Her expression softened slightly as she saw my exhaustion. "But in that department, I guess it can't be helped," she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "When I worked there before, well, I should have warned you more clearly about him." "Is Tommy already asleep?" I asked, glancing towards the stairs. "He tried to wake up for you," Sarah replied, and those words felt like a knife to my heart. "He drew you a picture at preschool today. It's on the fridge." I walked over to look at the crayon drawing. It showed 3 stick figures, clearly our family, having a picnic under a bright yellow sun. The smallest figure was holding what appeared to be a dinosaur toy. My vision blurred slightly as I stared at it. "He misses you," Sarah said softly. "We both do." I couldn't keep relying on Sarah like this. I wasn't just Tommy's father on paper. I wanted to be present in his life, to see him grow, to hear about his day directly from him rather than through Sarah's evening summaries. That night, after Sarah went to bed, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop. The manager was going to keep dumping work on me. I needed to find a way to handle it more efficiently. I started mapping out our department's workflow, identifying bottlenecks and redundancies. Over the next few weeks, I worked during my lunch breaks, and after Sarah and Tommy were asleep, creating a system to improve our workflow efficiency. It wasn't anything revolutionary, just a series of automated processes and standardized templates, but it had the potential to dramatically improve productivity. I remember the morning I first implemented the system. My hands were slightly shaky as I logged into my computer, wondering if it would work as planned. The manager had dumped another pile of contractor work on my desk the previous evening, wearing his usual smirk. This time was different. Tasks that usually took hours were completed in minutes. Reports that required manual cross-referencing were automatically synchronized. By lunchtime, I had finished at what would normally have taken me until evening. The results were immediate and undeniable. My overtime began to decrease dramatically. I started making it home for dinner more often, much to Tommy's delight. The first time I walked through the door at 3:50 p.m., he literally dropped his dinosaur toy in surprise and ran to hug my legs. "Daddy, you're home!" he exclaimed, bouncing up and down. "Can we play? Can we? I learned a new game at school today." Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway, a soft smile on her face. That night, we had dinner together as a family for the first time in weeks. Tommy chatted excitedly about his day, demonstrating his new dinosaur knowledge with sound effects included. It felt like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. The system had an unexpected ripple effect throughout the office. One morning, as I was getting coffee, Karen from accounting practically ambushed me by the break room. "Hey, Anderson! That system is such a huge help!" she exclaimed, clutching her coffee mug. "I used to stay until 8 every night trying to reconcile the sales report, but now everything matches up automatically. It's amazing!" Similar comments started coming from other colleagues. "Thanks to your system, my overtime has decreased too. Thank you so much," said Mike from marketing. "My kids actually remember what I look like now," he added with a laugh that carried a hint of previous pain. I felt shy, but generally happy being thanked by everyone. It was gratifying to see my skills helping others, to know that other families were also getting their evenings back. The office atmosphere had noticeably improved. There was more laughter, more casual conversation, more energy in general. But one person wasn't happy about these changes. The manager stormed into the office one morning, his face flushed with anger.
"What's going on here?"
he demanded, glaring at me.
"Complaining about overtime and now this?"
He leaned over my desk, his expensive cologne overwhelming.
"This is why you never get promoted. Acting all high and mighty when you're just a useless contractor who can't do the job properly.
It became clear that he viewed the reduction in overtime as a personal affront. In his mind, long hours were a badge of honor, a sign of dedication. The fact that we could accomplish the same work, or more, in less time, somehow threatened his worldview. Even though modern companies were increasingly emphasizing work-life balance and implementing no overtime policies, our managers seemed stuck in an outdated mentality, where suffering equaled success. As a result, while work efficiency improved and employee satisfaction increased, I found myself squarely in the manager's crosshairs. The announcement came on a regular Tuesday morning. Our department was buzzing with excitement as news spread about a major business partnership with a Silicon Valley tech company. This wasn't just any partnership. It was a deal that could transform our company's future. The partnership came with an unusual perk, a company-wide trip to San Francisco. Any department that applied could participate, and remarkably, employees could bring their families. The announcement email mentioned tours of the partner company's headquarters, team-building activities, and plenty of free time for sightseeing. When I told Sarah about the trip that evening, her eyes lit up with excitement. "San Francisco? When is it?" she asked, already pulling out her phone to check her work calendar. "I'm definitely coming too. I need to request time off right away." Tommy, picking up on her excitement even though he didn't understand why, started bouncing around the living room.
"Are we going on an airplane? Can I bring Rex?"
he asked, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. "Of course you could bring Rex," Sarah assured him, scooping him up for a hug. "He'll need his own passport though," she added with a wink, making Tommy giggle. The next morning, I carefully filled out the application form for the trip, triple-checking every detail. I made sure to include Sarah and Tommy's information correctly. Walking to the manager's office to submit it, I tried to stay positive despite the knot forming in my stomach. The manager was at his desk, scrolling through his phone with his feet propped up. He barely glanced up as I entered. I've submitted the application for the San Francisco trip," I said, placing the form on his desk. "Please, take care of it."
Yeah,
he drawled, picking up the form with 2 fingers as if it might be contaminated. His eyes scanned it briefly before his lips curled into that familiar smirk.
But you know."
"Yes?" I asked, though I was already dreading what was coming.
"Can't contractors even go on company trips?"
he asked with a laugh.
I mean, really?
I let out a weary sigh. After all these months, I was beyond tired of correcting him. Part of me wondered if he actually knew I was a regular employee and was just maintaining this fiction for his own amusement. Either way, I was too exhausted to argue. The weeks leading up to the trip were filled with excitement and preparation. Sarah took Tommy shopping for new clothes, and we bought matching luggage for our first family trip abroad. Tommy was fascinated by everything about air travel, peppering us with endless questions about planes and airports.
"Will we be able to see our house from up there?"
he asked one evening as we practiced packing his backpack. "We'll be too high for that, buddy," I explained, helping him fit Rex the dinosaur into the front pocket. "But we'll be able to see clouds and maybe even mountains." The morning of the trip arrived bright and clear. We got to the airport early, Tommy practically vibrating with excitement as he pulled his little rolling suitcase behind him. The terminal was crowded with our coworkers and their families, creating a festive atmosphere. Sarah looked radiant, wearing a new dress she bought specifically for the trip. "Excited, Tommy? We'll be on the plane soon," she said, holding his hand as he stared wide-eyed at everything around him. I felt proud watching Tommy take in the airport scene calmly. Despite the crowds and noise, he was handling it like a champion, clutching Rex in one arm while holding Sarah's hand with the other. Following the company's instructions, I led my family toward the area where our department was gathering. I could see several of my coworkers already there with their families, checking in with the manager who was holding a stack of documents. As we approached, the manager spotted us. His face split into a wide grin that made my blood run cold. He walked over, practically strutting.
"Did you really come? For real?"
he asked, looking us up and down with obvious amusement. Maintaining my professionalism, I nodded. Yes, good afternoon, sir. Looking forward to..."
No, you don't have boarding passes."
He interrupted with a laugh that drew attention from nearby groups. The world seemed to stop for a moment. "What?" I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Around us, conversations died down as people began to notice the confrontation. My coworkers shifted uncomfortably, some pretending not to notice while others watched openly. Behind me, I heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath. The manager's voice dripped with condensation as he continued.
"You could go on this trip. Go back to the office, contractor. Just answer phones like usual."
"What are you talking about?" I began, but he cut me off again.
"A contractor wanting to go on a company trip. Don't you have any common sense?" "Oh, right. Being a contractor, you probably don't know these things."
His voice carried clearly across the now silent gathering. "Hey!" I started to protest, anger finally breaking through my usual restraint. "John!" Sarah's quiet voice stopped me. Her hand on my arm was gentle but firm. The manager looked between us, clearly enjoying the scene he was creating. His eye landed on our matching luggage, the new clothes, Tommy's carefully packed backpack. His laugh was loud and mocking.
Wow, you were really planning to go, huh? I'm sorry, ma'am,
he said to Sarah, his voice dripping with false sympathy.
But Anderson here seems to have misunderstood. Must be embarrassing for him in front of his wife. But hey, you're partly to blame too. I mean, having a contractor for a husband.
For the first time in my professional life, I seriously considered violence. My body moved forward of its own accord. Hands clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. The manager's smug face was just one step away. But Sarah, still holding Tommy, stepped between us. "John! Come on, let's go," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the situation. Her eyes met mine, conveying both understanding and warning. I took a deep breath, unclenching my fist with effort. The rage still burned, but Tommy was watching. What kind of example would I be setting if I let the manager provoke me into violence? We moved away from the department gathering area, finding a quiet spot near a coffee shop. The smell of freshly ground coffee and pastries contrasted sharply with the bitter taste in my mouth. "Sorry. Because of me," I started, but Sarah shook her head. "It's okay. That man is just..." She paused, choosing her words carefully with Tommy present. "I heard he was like this when I worked there before, but I never thought he'd go this far. To deliberately withhold our boarding passes. That's beyond petty." She suddenly straightened up, a determined look crossing her face. Pointing at the departure board above us, she said, "Hey, if we don't have boarding passes, let's try this. There might be seats available on another flight." The suggestion caught me off guard. "You still want to go?" "Of course," she replied with fierce determination. "We promised Tommy his first plane ride, and we're not letting that person take that away from us. Plus," she added with a small smile, "we have someone waiting for us in San Francisco, don't we?" She was right. Beyond the company trip, we had plans to meet an old friend in America, someone I hadn't seen in years, who had remained close to our hearts. "Yeah, you're right. I'll go check quietly, wait here and rest a bit," I said, giving Tommy's head a gentle pat. "Okay, thank you," Sarah replied, really pulling out some snacks for Tommy. I headed to the airline counter, explanation ready. The ticketing agent listened sympathetically to our situation, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she checked availability. "You're in luck," she said with a warm smile. "We have seats available on the flight leaving in 2 hours. It's a bit more expensive than the company's group rate, but..." "We'll take it," I said without hesitation. Some things were worth more than money. Returning to Sarah and Tommy, I found them sharing a chocolate croissant. "We're good to go. Different flight, but we'll still get there today." Sarah's face lit up. "It's wonderful. See, Tommy? We're still going on an adventure." Tommy looked up from his croissant, chocolate smeared around his mouth.
Can Rex still come?
"Of course Rex can still come," I laughed, feeling the tension start to drain away. "We couldn't leave your dinosaur behind." While Sarah cleaned Tommy's face, I pulled out my phone to message our friend in America about the change of plans. "We'll come directly today. Yeah, the situation changed a bit, but we managed to get tickets." The response came almost immediately. "Great news! Can't wait to see you all. The guest room is ready." Sarah read the message over my shoulder. "I'm glad we can still go. This is going to be more fun anyway. No structured company tours, no formal dinners, just us and old friends." She was right as usual. This way we could explore San Francisco at our own pace, spend quality time with our friends, and make this trip truly about our family rather than work. Several hours later, our plane touched down at San Francisco International Airport. As we made our way through immigration and collected our bags, I spotted a familiar face in the arrival area. Robert stood there with his family, holding a handmade welcome sign decorated with dinosaur stickers, clearly made with Tommy in mind. "Robert, you came all the way here!" Sarah called out, waving enthusiastically. "It's been so long!" I added, quickening my pace. "John, Sarah, long time no see!" Robert's voice boomed across the terminal. He looked exactly as I remembered him from our Stanford days. Same warm smile, same infectious energy, though his hair was perhaps a bit grayer at the temples. Robert wasn't just an American friend. He had been my colleague during our computer science studies at Stanford. We had spent countless nights debugging code together, sharing dreams of changing the tech world. He knew Sarah too, had been there when we first started dating, and attending our wedding. But life, careers, and family responsibilities had made our meetings less frequent over the years. After greeting Robert's wife, Emily, I found myself facing a small boy clutching her hand. "Hello, thank you for coming to pick us up," I said, crouching down to the child's eye level. This was Robert's son. By an amazing coincidence, he was the same age as Tommy. They had been born in the same year, something we had marveled at when it happened, feeling it was somehow meant to be. Tommy, suddenly shy, peeked out from behind Sarah's legs. Robert's son stared back with equal curiosity. Both boys were clutching stuffed dinosaurs. I noticed with amusement.
"Well, you must be tired,"
Robert said, clapping his hands together.
"Let's head to my place and relax. I'll show you our new house."
"Oh yeah, I heard you bought a new house after getting married," Sarah exclaimed, as we loaded our luggage into Robert's Tesla Model X. "That's what you mentioned in your last email."
"That's right,"
Robert grinned, helping Tommy with his seatbelt.
"You'll love it. It's in a great area, close to some amazing parks and schools."
The drive from the airport took us through the heart of Silicon Valley. Tommy and Robert's son, Michael, pressed their faces against the windows, amazed by the palm trees and glimpses of the bay. As we drove, Robert pointed out various tech company headquarters, each one more impressive than the last. Originally, we were supposed to stay at a hotel with the company group, and when our plans changed suddenly, Robert had insisted we stay with them. Despite the short notice, they had prepared a guest room for us, complete with fresh flowers and welcome baskets. Their house turned out to be a beautiful modern home in the hills, with a view of the entire valley. Emily had prepared a feast for our arrival. The kitchen counter was laden with dishes that combined American comfort food with gourmet flair. "I remember you loved my barbecue chicken when we were in college," she said, bringing out another plate. "I made sure to prepare it today." As we settled in to eat, I watched Tommy and Michael tentatively approach each other. Despite the language barrier, they seemed drawn together by some invisible force. Perhaps it was the matching dinosaurs they clutched, or maybe just the natural openness of childhood. Michael held out his dinosaur to Tommy.
This is T-Rex.
He said slowly in English. Tommy's eyes lit up at the familiar word.
Rex!
He replied excitedly, holding up his own stuffed dinosaur. Within minutes, they were sitting on the floor together, creating an elaborate dinosaur adventure that somehow transcended the need for a common language. The adults watched in amazement as they constructed an entire prehistoric world, using nothing but toys and imagination.
"Kids are amazing, aren't they?"
Robert observed, refilling our wine glasses.
"Prejudices, no complications, just pure friendship."
As an evening wore on and the children played, Robert suddenly turned to me with a more serious expression.
"By the way, what happened? When you suddenly messaged about coming directly, I was so happy I rushed to the airport. But I thought you were supposed to be here on a company trip."
About that. I glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Over the next hour, I told Robert everything. The manager's persistent misidentification of me as a contractor, the daily harassment, the overtime, the efficiency system I created, and finally, the humiliation at the airport. Robert listened intently, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "Oh my god! It's crazy!" Emily exclaimed when I finished. "Do people really do that in American companies?"
"No, they don't,"
Robert said firmly, setting down his wine glass.
"I never heard of such unprofessional behavior being tolerated. I was shocked when you first told me you were working there, John."
I looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?"
"Does this person really not know you're a regular employee? When you're so talented?"
Robert shook his head in disbelief.
"I mean, after everything you've accomplished."
"Thanks," I replied, somewhat embarrassed by his praise. But Robert wasn't finished. He leaned forward, a glint in his eye that I recognized from our college days, the look he got when he had an idea.
"So, what do you think about coming to work for me instead?"
"What? What?" Sarah and I exclaimed simultaneously. Robert laughed, clearly enjoying our reaction.
"It would be fun, just like old times, but better. We could work together again, create amazing things."
His wife nodded enthusiastically beside him. "Oh yes, that would be wonderful. The boys could grow up together too." I stared at Robert in shock, trying to process his offer. Sarah sat beside me, equally stunned. Sounds of dinosaur battles continued in the background as our children played, oblivious to the adults' intense conversation. "I'd love to, but..." I glanced at Sarah, then at Tommy. "Sarah, what do you think?" Sarah looked thoughtful, her eyes moving between Tommy and Michael playing together, then back to me. She had that expression she always wore when analyzing a complex problem. The slight furrow on her brow, the way she absently twisted her wedding ring. "Wait, give me some time to think," she said finally. Robert nodded understandingly.
"Of course, this is a big decision. Sleep on it, talk it over. Your offer isn't going anywhere.
We spent the rest of the evening catching up on lighter topics, sharing stories about our college days that had both Emily and Sarah laughing. But I could see Sarah's mind was working, considering all the angles of Robert's proposition. It wasn't until after dinner, when the boys had finally exhausted themselves and fallen asleep on the playroom floor, that Sarah pulled me aside into Robert's back patio. The San Francisco night was cool and clear. The valley below was sparkling with thousands of lights. "John?" she began, her voice soft but determined. "I've been thinking about Robert's offer." "And?" I asked, my heart beating faster. I think we should do it." She turned to face me fully. "I know it's scary, moving to a new country, starting over. But look at Tommy in there. He's already made a friend. And Robert's company, it's not just any company, is it?" I shook my head. The truth was, I've been keeping a secret from my current company, one that would soon come to light in a very dramatic way. The next morning, I accompanied Robert to his workplace. Walking in the sleek modern building, I immediately spotted some familiar faces. Our CEO and several managers from my company, all there for the partnership inspection.
"Ah, Mr. Wilson!"
Our CEO's voice carried across the lobby, filled with deference and respect.
Hello, everyone.
Robert replied warmly.
Thank you for coming all the way here to inspect our company.
No, we're honored to have this opportunity.
Our CEO bowed repeatedly. Then they spotted me standing beside Robert. The manager's face went through several shades of red before settling on a purplish hue.
"Why are you here?"
He spluttered.
"Did you pay your own way here? Following us around like some stray dog. We're in the middle of important business, so get lost."
The manager grabbed my arm roughly, the same arm he had slapped at the airport, but this time I was ready. I pulled back forcefully, breaking his grip and causing him to stumble slightly.
"Hey!"
He protested, clearly not used to resistance from me. Our CEO was watching the exchange with growing confusion.
"Why are you here? The manager told us you couldn't come to America."
The CEO's glare shifted to the manager, who began sweating visibly.
"Well, you see,"
the manager stammered.
"Anderson said he couldn't go on the trip himself. Something about family circumstances."
His weak excuses trailed off as everyone in the room turned to stare at him. Even the receptionist had stopped pretending to work and was watching the scene unfold.
I've heard that he's here precisely because of that person.
Robert spoke up, his voice carrying authority that made everyone straighten instinctively.
He probably submitted his application form, but this person here didn't process it properly. Does your company not verify document submissions?
Our CEO's face had gone pale.
"We deeply apologize for this unseemly situation,"
he began, bowing repeatedly. Beside him, the manager had also started bowing, though his eyes still shot daggers at me whenever he thought no one was looking. He clearly thought this was all my fault somehow. But Robert wasn't finished. Looking directly at the manager, he declared in a voice that left no room for argument.
I cannot do business with a company that has such an irresponsible person.
"What? But...
The manager sputtered, his face alternating between red and white. His perfectly pressed suit suddenly seemed to hang awkwardly on his frame as he stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water.
The only reason I considered doing business with your company,
Robert continued calmly,
was because he was there.
The manager let out a harsh laugh, though there was a note of hysteria in it now.
"For a mere contractor? You can't be serious."
Even now, even here, he was clinging to that fiction. Robert's expression hardened slightly, and I recognized the look from our college days, the one he got right before delivering a knockout argument in our debate club.
Don't you know?
Robert's voice was quiet, but carried clearly through the now silent lobby.
He's a world-renowned cybersecurity expert.
"What?"
The manager's shout echoed off the glass walls, causing several people to wince. The truth was finally coming out. Robert and I had indeed studied computer science together at Stanford, sharing late-night coding sessions and ambitious dreams. While he had gone on to found his own company, I had taken a different path. After graduation, while Sarah chose the corporate path, I had established an independent organization dedicated to protecting American companies from cyber threats worldwide. My organization had grown to a respected entity in the cybersecurity field, operating quietly but effectively behind the scenes. The reason Sarah had recommended this particular company to me wasn't just for a job. They had specifically sought my expertise. "Your company approached John because they wanted his cybersecurity knowledge," Sarah explained, stepping forward from where she had been quietly observing. "They knew exactly who he was when they hired him." The manager's head whipped around to stare at her, then back at me. His Harvard-educated mind was clearly struggling to reconcile his image of the useless contractor with this new reality. Robert nodded, continuing the explanation.
I've been trying to recruit him for years, but he always turned me down. Said he couldn't leave his work in the States.
He smiled slightly.
That's why I decided to partner with your company, where he was working. I thought we could collaborate while respecting his choices to stay with you.
Then you'll still do business for our company, right?
The manager's voice had taken on a desperate edge.
Yeah, after all, Anderson works for us.
Robert cut him off mid-sentence, just as the manager had done to me so many times before.
No, I won't, because he's been hired to work here.
What?
The manager's shout was even louder this time, causing several people to step back in alarm. He quickly lowered his voice, but his eyes darted wildly between Robert and me.
Hired?
Our CEO stepped forward, his face ashen. What do you mean, hired?
Exactly what I said.
Robert replied, placing a hand on my shoulder.
He's agreed to work for my company.
The manager staggered slightly, reaching out to steady himself against a nearby wall. The reality of what he had done, how his petty harassment had just cost the company a major partnership, was finally sinking in.
But...
He stammered, looking around desperately for support. Finding none, he turned to me with an entirely new expression, one of pleading.
Anderson-san, surely you wouldn't... I mean, we've worked together for so long.
I met his gaze steadily, remembering all the times he had dismissed me, interrupted me, belittled me. Yes, we have worked together, I agreed quietly. And in all that time, did you ever once listen to what I was trying to tell you? The manager's face crumpled as my words hit home. For perhaps the first time, he was truly hearing me. But it was far too late. Our CEO broke the tense silence.
Mr. Wilson, please, surely we can discuss this. Partnership will be beneficial for both our companies.
I don't partner with companies that allow harassment and discrimination,
Robert replied firmly.
The way this man has treated one of the most respected experts in cybersecurity because of his own misassumptions, it shows a fundamental problem with your corporate culture.
After the confrontation, everything changed rapidly. Our CEO's immediate response was to demote the manager to a regular employee position. The manager's face during the demotion meeting was a study in disbelief, as if he couldn't quite comprehend how his world had turned upside down so completely. For about a month, he had tried to adjust to his new role. I observed from a distance as he struggled with the same task he had once dismissed as contractor work. His former subordinates, remembering his previous treatment of them, showed little patience in training him.
Could you make 10 copies of these due today?
I overheard one of them say to him, using his exact words from months ago. The manager's face had turned an interesting shade of purple, but he couldn't refuse. Being looked down upon by his former subordinates and being asked to do menial tasks seemed to wear him down quickly. One morning, about 5 weeks after the demotion, his desk was empty. He had submitted his resignation letter during the night. After the manager's departure, our CEO made repeated attempts to salvage the partnership of Robert's company. Email after email arrived, each more desperate than the last.
They really want this partnership,
Robert observed one evening at his house, where we were still staying while house hunting.
What do you think?
I thought about my former colleagues, about how they suffered under the manager too. Many of them were good people who had been caught in the same toxic environment. Well, I said slowly, now that the manager is gone, the company might be able to change for the better. Sarah nodded in agreement. Some of my old colleagues still work there. They're good people who deserve a chance. After much discussion, Robert and I agreed to give the partnership another chance. The relief on our CEO's face during the video call was palpable. The partnership proceeded, but with strict conditions about corporate culture and employee treatment. As for me, my transition to Robert's company was surprisingly smooth. Robert had already prepared everything for my arrival, making the resignation and move feel almost effortless.
Welcome to your new office,
Robert said, showing me around a spacious corner office with a view of the bay.
Though knowing you'll probably spend more time in development labs.
He was right. I found myself drawn to the innovative projects and brilliant minds in the company's cybersecurity division. The freedom to pursue my ideas without constant belittlement was exhilarating. Sarah's transition was equally successful. Robert had recognized her talent during our college days, and now she was leading her own team in the company. We often had lunch together in the company's rooftop garden, something we never managed in our previous jobs. We found a beautiful house not far from Robert's, with a backyard that Tommy immediately claimed as his dinosaur park. The move was surprisingly easy for him. Having Michael nearby made the transition feel more like an adventure than an upheaval. Still, we initially worried about preschool. The question of childcare where Sarah and I were working loomed large in our minds. That's when Sarah came up with a brilliant idea. During a lunch break, she approached Robert with a proposal about creating an on-site daycare at the company.
A company daycare?
Robert leaned forward in his chair, intrigued. We were sitting in his office, San Francisco skyline gleaming behind him. Sarah nodded enthusiastically, spreading out the proposal she prepared. Not just for Tommy and Michael, but for all employees' children. Look at these statistics. The number one reason talented parents leave tech companies is the lack of flexible childcare options. Robert studied the detailed plans Sarah had drawn up. The proposed daycare would be more than just a babysitting service. It would be an enriching environment of educational programs, play areas, and even a small science lab for older kids. The cost might seem high initially, Sarah acknowledged, flipping to her budget projections. But consider the long-term benefits: increased employee retention, higher job satisfaction, and a major selling point for recruiting top talent who have families. Emily, who had joined us for the presentation, was practically bouncing in her seat. This is exactly what Silicon Valley needs. A company that truly supports working parents instead of just talking about it. Robert didn't need much convincing. Within weeks, construction began on converting an unused floor of the building into a state-of-the-art childcare facility. Sarah threw herself into the project, coordinating with child development experts and architects to create the perfect space. The day the daycare opened was a milestone not just for us, but for the entire company. Tommy and Michael proudly led the other children on tours, showing off the dinosaur corner they had helped design.
And this is where we learn about science,
Tommy explained to a group of wide-eyed toddlers, pointing to the mini lab equipment with its safety rounded edges and child-friendly materials. The impact on the company culture was immediate and profound. Parents who have been struggling to balance work and family life suddenly found themselves part of a supportive community. Impromptu playdates and parent support groups formed naturally. I was considering leaving tech altogether before this, one mother told Sarah during a parent coffee morning. Trying to coordinate daycare pickup with product lunch deadlines was impossible. But now, she gestures to where her daughter was happily engaged in a coding game design for preschoolers. The daycare initiative caught the attention of other tech companies. Soon, Robert was fielding calls from CEOs, wanting to learn more about our family-friendly policies. Sarah found herself giving presentations about the program at industry conferences, her initial proposal evolving into a model for corporate childcare. Emily was practically delighted with the changes. This is what I always dreamed of, she confided one afternoon as we watched our boys in the daycare's outdoor play area. A workplace where having a family isn't seen as a career liability. Life settled into a new rhythm, one that felt more natural and balanced than anything we'd experienced before. Our mornings began with a short commute together, dropping Tommy off at the daycare before heading to our respective offices. Often, we meet for lunch in the rooftop garden, sometimes joined by Robert and Emily, our children playing nearby under the watchful eyes of the daycare staff. The contrast with our previous life was stark. Instead of missing dinner or struggling with overtime, we were home every evening, able to enjoy family meals and bedtime stories. Tommy thrived in the new environment, his English improving rapidly through daily play with Michael and the other children.
Daddy, did you know dinosaurs had feathers?
He announced one evening, pronouncing feathers carefully in English.
Mike and I learned that in science class today.
While Silicon Valley is often characterized as a merit-based society, I discovered it was also a place that valued innovation and workplace culture as much as in technology. Our company became known not just for its technical excellence, but for its revolutionary approach to work-life balance. One morning, I arrived to my office to find Robert waiting with an unusual request.
John, would you join me for a meeting? There's someone I'd like you to meet.
The visitor turned out to be my former company CEO, who had flown in specifically to see our operations. He looked around our office with undisguised amazement, particularly at the happy sounds of children drifting up from the daycare floor.
This is incredible,
he admitted, watching a group of employees having a meeting in the outdoor garden area while their children played nearby under supervision.
We've been trying to implement some of these ideas, but we needed to see it in action to really understand.
The changes in my former company have been significant since the manager's department. They had completely restructured their hierarchy, implementing many of the efficiency systems I had created. More importantly, they had begun to address their corporate culture.
Your departure was a wake-up call,
the CEO confessed during lunch.
We realized we were losing talented people because we were stuck in an old-fashioned thinking. The manager, he was a symptom of a bigger problem.
Robert, who had joined us, nodded understandingly.
Change isn't easy, but it's necessary. The tech industry is evolving. Companies that don't support their employees' whole lives will fall behind.
The partnership between our companies had flourished, despite its rocky start. We'd established joint projects that benefited from both companies' strengths. Sometimes, when I visited their offices for meetings, I would pass by the manager's old desk, now occupied by a young woman who had implemented several impressive improvements to the department's workflow. Sarah's career had taken off in unexpected ways too. Her daycare initiative had grown into a full-fledged corporate wellness program that was being studied by companies worldwide. She regularly gave keynote speeches at industry conferences, sharing her story and the importance of creating truly family-friendly workplaces. "Remember when we were worried about moving?" she asked one evening as we sat in our backyard, watching Tommy and Michael build an elaborate dinosaur world in the sandbox. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." The boys had become inseparable friends, their initial language barrier long forgotten. They switched effortlessly between Japanese and English, creating their own special mix of the two languages that only they fully understood.
Dad! Michael! Look what I found!
Tommy called out one day during a weekend hike in the hills near our house. He was pointing out excitedly at some unusual rocks that, to his imagination, looked exactly like dinosaur eggs. These weekend adventures have become our family tradition, often enjoyed by Robert and his family. We'd pack picnics, explore trails, and let the boys run wild in nature. It was during these quiet moments, watching our children play freely and happily, that I fully appreciated how far we'd come. Robert proved to be not just an excellent colleague and boss, but a true friend who really listened. Our weekly strategy meetings often evolved into wide-ranging discussions about the future of technology, family life, and how to create workplaces that truly serve human needs. The experience taught me something profound about human relationships. The simple act of listening, really listening, to others is crucial, whether they're family, friends, or colleagues. The manager's inability to listen had been his ultimate downfall. He'd been so convinced of his own superiority, he had never bothered to learn who I really was, what I could contribute, or how his actions affected others. In contrast, Robert's leadership style was built on respect and genuine interest in his employees' perspectives.
"Every person here has something valuable to offer,"
he often said.
"Our job is to listen and learn from each other."
Looking back at our journey from that humiliating moment at the airport to our new life in Silicon Valley, I realized that what seemed like a crushing defeat had actually been a blessing in disguise. The manager's cruelty had pushed us towards a better future, one where we could thrive both professionally and personally. Tommy grew stronger and more confident in his new environment, making friends from diverse backgrounds and developing a curiosity about the world that delighted his teachers. The shy boy who had once clung to his mother's legs at the airport now confidently led tours for new children at the daycare, proudly showing off his favorite spots in both Japanese and English. As for me, I found joy in my work again, the freedom to pursue innovative solutions, the support to balance family life and professional goals, and the satisfaction of seeing my ideas implemented and appreciated. It was everything I had hoped for in a career. Each morning, as I drive to work with my family, watching the sun rise over the San Francisco Bay, I'm reminded of an important truth. Sometimes, the worst moments in our lives can lead us to the best ones. We just have to be brave enough to make the leap when opportunity presents itself. In the end, the manager taught me an invaluable lesson, though not the one he intended. He showed me what kind of a leader not to be, and in doing so, helped guide me to where I truly belonged. To avoid becoming like that manager, I promised myself to always cherish the people around me, to listen more than I speak, and to remember that true strength lies not in putting others down, but in lifting them up.